Let's see, how many of you had Nokia phones at some point in your life? Okay, notice that I didn't raise my hand. I never had a Nokia phone. How many of you have heard of Bell Labs before? All right. So Bell Labs now, we celebrated 100 years this year. So we've been around since 1925. Originally, the Bell part of Bell Labs comes from Alexander Graham Bell, who invented the phone. Originally, the labs were in Murray Hill, New York, and in 1941, we moved to Murray Hill, New Jersey, and it's called Murray Hill because we were on West Street in Murray Hill in the city. We just announced a couple of years ago that we're staying in New Jersey, but we're moving to New Brunswick. So there's a big change. Yes, there's a big change for us. And throughout the 100 years, we've always been the research organization of the mother company. Originally, at some point, Western Electric, if any of you have heard of Western Electric, AT&T, and then after the monopoly and the divestiture of AT&T, AT&T was broken up. Bell Labs became the research part of Lucent Technology, merged with Alcatel, which was the French competitor, became Alcatel-Lucent, and Nokia acquired Alcatel-Lucent. But Bell Labs has always been the research part of the mother company. So I like to say I worked for 3 companies, but I only had 1 job interview in my life. For us, we consider ourselves the premier industrial research lab. So we don't do development, really. We don't do short term. We really think about fundamental problems in communication, networking, and how do we interact, how do we share information between people and machines, and between machines more and more. And if you think about communication, it's really all about shrinking distance. Right? And the original communication problem was really, how do you communicate between the East Coast and the West Coast? And that led to the national communication infrastructure. Then it became, how do you communicate between US and Europe? We launched the first communication satellite in the 60s to bridge US and Europe. And so fundamentally, I think communication is all about bringing people together in time and location. Nothing better than in-person meetings, so thank you for organizing this, and thanks for having me. But sometimes you're not in the same place, so it's all about how do we share information, how do we feel that we're actually closely connected, and communication is fundamental to that. And over the decades, the problems that we solve change. But we always want to solve the hardest technology problems in communication and networking. They change over time, but that's kind of our mission. We think more academically, so we think a little bit further out in the future. We don't work on the current generation of Nokia products, but we think 1-2 generations ahead. And then we have this concept of future back. Imagine the future you want in 10 years, and then bring it back to today, and what are the baby steps you take now to get to that future. We're also known for Nobel Prizes and Turing Awards and all of those. And everybody says, oh, Bell Labs has 10 Nobel Prizes. That's all great. But I can tell you nobody in the company has an annual performance objective of winning a Nobel Prize. For us, Nobel Prizes are things that you win when you do important work that changes the world. So it is the recognition that you have actually done something meaningful versus a goal in itself. The humbling part for me is every time I walk through the building, I go through our technology showcase and I walk past the previous Bell Labs presidents and I feel like very small. And then I walk past the Nobel Prizes and I feel even smaller and go like, I will never be on, I'm on that one wall, which is also scary when you see your face every morning when you come in, but I will never be on the Nobel Prize wall. So it's quite humbling, but that's kind of who we are. You probably all have a lot of Bell Labs technology in your pockets, on your tables right now. You just don't know it. I give you a couple of examples. The most famous invention from Bell Labs is still the transistor, 1947. We're working really, really hard every day to come up with something bigger, but we have not invented anything bigger than the transistor. And it fundamentally changed communication and computing. Just as a reference, your iPhone probably has 18 billion transistors in it. Before the transistor, we used something called vacuum tubes, which were unreliable, very power hungry, and if you would build your phone on vacuum tubes, it would be the size of the Empire State Building. So think about how that fundamentally changed. There's transistors in every piece of electronics, and as I said, your phone has 18 billion of them. A lot of things happened in 1947, and famously Bill Gates said if he could time travel, he would want to be in Murray Hill, New Jersey in December 1947, because that's when he invented the transistor. The very concept of cellular technology, we all use cell phones, but the concept of cellular technology was also invented by Bell Labs in 47. And in 1948, Claude Shannon created the field of information theory, which was a mathematical formulation of how much information can you transmit between 2 points. And it codified from a mathematical perspective, how do you send information reliably from one point to the other. So Bill Gates said that if he could time travel, he would want to be in Murray Hill, New Jersey in 1947 and kind of witness all of that. 2 weeks ago, we broke ground on our new building in New Brunswick, and my colleague and co-president of Bell Labs, he said 1941, when we moved to Murray Hill, was kind of the starting point and maybe the catalyst for a new era of invention, and we hope that when we move to New Brunswick, we do the same. And then I said, well, hopefully in 50 years, people will say, I wish I could time travel to New Brunswick, New Jersey in 1928 and witness the inventions at that time. So we'll see. I want to talk, since we talk about AI, I want to share a little bit more about what we do in AI. And so for a lot of things that Professor Ghosh talked about this morning actually resonate with me, and I'm quite happy he framed it. And then he had a number of examples and use cases. So keep that framing in mind. I'll give you the telecom examples. So for us, a lot of it is about how do we put AI into the network. When I say network, I mean your 5G network. When you connect your cell phone to the network, when you connect data centers, when you connect the East Coast to Europe with subsea cables, when you connect your fiber to the home on your Fios cable network. All of those are networking technologies for us. Some are wireless, some are optical, some are copper, different types of technologies, but how do you bring AI into the network to make these networks better, faster, cheaper, more energy efficient? That's been the game in telecom. How do you make networks faster, cheaper, transmit more information, connect more devices, transmit more information, transmit it more reliably, and spend less energy doing so. Right? And then we kind of look at the life cycle of networks. And life cycle of network has multiple parts. The first part is you just design the network. How do I design a network? So how do I design a network to have AI natively in the network from the design? Before I build anything, I want to make sure the design of that network is AI native and AI optimized. So now I've designed the network, now I'm deploying it. So let's use the example of wireless networks. Pick your service provider, whether it's Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile. They buy the equipment from companies like us, and then they decide where they deploy the network. Well, they need to do some study on where do they deploy these towers that you see along the road, along the highway, on the side of buildings. Well, they want to know where are people, where's the traffic coming from, like communication traffic. So you can put AI into that deployment and that figuring out how you deploy the network, how many of these base stations do you deploy, where do you deploy them, what configuration do you deploy on these networks. So that's the second part. After you designed it to be AI native, how do you use AI to optimize? And a short story on why that is important and helpful. When I started 25 years ago, it was the 3G era, and the first thing my boss told me, we need to collect data. So this morning I made the comment, I need to collect data. So it was like, we need to collect data on how well the network works. And one of the first projects I worked on was like actually driving my car around New Jersey and collect data. And you really don't want to do that because it's very time consuming. And when you're sitting in Morristown in a neighborhood with your laptop in your car for 5 hours and the cops come and ask you, what are you doing here? And you're lucky to have a letter from your boss that explains why you're doing that, you're going to go like, this is maybe not the way we should really be collecting data. So, and this was all collect data so we can then improve and optimize the configurations of the network. So now we have AI where we can really optimize these networks much better, much faster. So it's the design, the deployment, then it's the operation of the network. because the traffic that you have at night is very different from the traffic that you have in the morning during rush hour. So you don't want to have your network not be optimally configured for the amount of traffic you're sending through it, because the more, if your configuration is not optimal, the more energy you spend on it. And that's costly, right? So you want to kind of make sure your network capacity matches your network traffic. But how do you do that? Because if you scale your capacity back too quickly, then you all get upset and you have dropped calls. On the other side, you don't want to overbuild your capacity and not have the traffic, because that's then costly and expensive from an energy perspective. So that's an area where AI comes in. The fourth area where AI is also really interesting is everything with customer care, troubleshooting, root cause analysis. You have all this data, but you have 1,000 tickets, 1,000 people call you and saying, my call dropped. Well, what's the one reason that you want to fix first that has the biggest impact to restore service for as many customers as quickly as possible? So the whole thing about understanding the performance of the network, troubleshooting, and so forth is really, really important. And the last one, I think it goes a little bit to the prescriptive part from this morning that I'm excited is, like, how can you predict the performance of the network? And one thing that I'm excited and amazed about is like something called predictive maintenance. We can right now predict 2 weeks in advance of hardware failures. And you're like, how do you do this, right? And so that's kind of, you analyze everything that you know about your network, your performance, the temperature, the wind conditions, you can predict hardware failures. Why is that important? Because if I know that something will fail, I'll ship replacement part before the current one fails. Means no downtime on the network, you don't feel your service is disrupted because I'm rerouting the traffic or I'm replacing the parts before they fail. So that's kind of AI across different network technologies and then across the different lifecycle phases of the network. That's all network, and I say that's AI in the digital world. The other part that I think I would encourage all of you to think about is what I call AI in the physical world. And for us, that means AI is connecting physical things, not just your phones or your smart glasses, but more and more wireless networks connect robots, machines. So how do we bring AI into the physical world? And this is all about understanding what is going on around us. I think if you're in retail, you want to understand what's the traffic, how do people move, how long do they spend in each aisle of the store. If you're a factory, you want to know how well your robots are working. If you're in a smart city, you want to know where the cars are. You want to know where the pedestrians are. So capturing the physical world around us, understanding that, and then optimizing the physical world, that's something that people have not really talked about in AI. Everybody talks about the documents, the understanding digital information, but understanding the physical world and applying AI for us to better understand and optimize the physical world around us. I think that's a part that maybe Silicon Valley doesn't get too excited about, but I think that's sort of the next wave of AI. And then the final thing, and I'm probably going over my 10 minutes, the last thing is really the topic of the panel, which is responsible AI. We consider networks to be mission critical, especially when you use networks for connecting mission critical infrastructure. Communication technology is mission critical. Imagine going through COVID without networks, without your broadband at home. We would have been completely different experience if COVID had happened 20 years earlier and we didn't have broadband at home. There is no homeschooling, there is no working from home without communication. We're connecting energy grids, we're connecting railroads. More and more you have these wireless technologies being used in defense, public safety. So communication infrastructure is mission critical. It's not just about, I'm downloading a cat video, okay, that's cool, but communication infrastructure is really mission critical. And so you need to make sure that when you put AI into these systems, you understand how it performs. You have reproducibility. You have an understanding of what it's doing and why it's doing it. So my example is if I use ChatGPT to create a poem or a cooking recipe and it makes a mistake and it's not really good, it doesn't really matter. right? Okay, it doesn't taste very good, I throw the food away and start over again. If the poem is not really good, maybe my wife gets upset, but it's not really the same impact as if I put AI into a mission-critical network and it fails, or it hallucinates and produces really bad outcomes, and all of a sudden there's service disruptions. So we think of responsible AI in that context. And from Bell Labs, we've defined the Nokia responsible AI strategy, and we have 6 pillars that I'll just briefly mention to you. One is reliability, one is transparency, one is fairness, one is sustainability, and that's primarily from an energy perspective. One is accountability, and the other one is privacy. So all of those are really, really important. And from a research perspective, we don't just solve the technical problems, but we also lead the company in these new topics. And so we've defined the AI SOPs for Nokia and the responsible AI pillars. So those are the ones that are officially in the Nokia ESG strategy, if you read that. The one that I will close on that I think we should add is financial responsibility. And I think it goes a little bit to what's the ROI on AI. I think with some of you, I said, is AI a hammer for every nail, and we just blindly apply it to everything? We don't really know what the ROI is, so I very much appreciate your comments. I think you're thinking more, what's the right use case, and how do I apply it, and do I quantify, and do I have the evidence that it actually produces a result, versus it's the latest, greatest thing, I'm applying it to everything. So I think there is still maybe an awakening coming in terms of the ROI on AI. And so I'll close with that. I'll invite the panelists to maybe come up, and hopefully that will also trigger some of your questions for the panel from that perspective. Thank you very much. So I thought we start with maybe something quite easy for each one of you. I promise it will get harder as we go through. But maybe just quite easy. If you could just each very briefly introduce yourselves, and sort of similar to what I said, maybe a little bit shorter, if you can, on what does AI mean for you, right? AI is very broad, and there's different facets and aspects of AI, but how do you touch AI, and how does AI touch your work on a daily basis? So maybe we'll start with you, Christine.
Okay, so my name's Christine. I wear many hats. Whenever I think about AI and how it touches me, I live in the growth world. I do marketing, sales, so I think about productivity. I think about cost cutting. I think about creativity, and that's where I play with AI. You know, and at the same time, I advise startups. So I help them kind of think through some of those ways to implement AI and think through some of the issues that we've all been discussing all day.
I'm Suzy, Davidkhanian. I work for market research firm EMARKETER. Hopefully a lot of you know the company. We do digital transformation. We help a lot of different clients, from very small ones to very, very large ones that you have heard of, better understand how to think about their business and move the needle, or sometimes just confirm some of the things that they know rooted in data. And it's kind of like a trick question, because we use AI at the office to help do our jobs better, so it's more of a content use. But when I talk to retailers, I cover retail. When we talk to retailers, we have to think about AI in terms of helping the operations be smoother, more efficient, cost cutting, you know, growth. You use some great examples on the retail front, but we also have to remember that consumers are using AI tools, and so you also have to put that hat on, right? If you're not solving for a problem, then it's probably not what you need to be using.
Mm-hmm. Julie?
Hi, Julie Lane, and I have spent about 20 years in financial services. Most recently, about 3 weeks ago, moved over to Chubb, but prior, 4.5 years working at AWS Amazon, 3 years working primarily in AI, and had this really interesting role where CEOs and C-suite executives would come and say, I need help accelerating time to value. And I would fly around the world and go into boardrooms and explain and answer questions on the fly. So very similar to this morning with Dr. Rose. I mean, heard just all these interesting conversations around how do you do this and what does it mean and how do you get started. So that's really mine, and I would plus one and add to everything you all said. For me, one of the biggest lenses when I'm working with customers is also time savings. In my world, I am starved for time. I think all of us are starved for time, and I'm looking for efficiency, productivity, and where I can actually save time.
Thank you. Jim?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jim Samuel. I'm a faculty at Rutgers. So I teach a course on artificial intelligence and a studio in natural language processing. And I like to say I'm a pre-ChatGPT AI professional from the days when it was not cool to talk about AI. People walked away if I spoke about AI, but now it's different. Yeah, so my research is divided into two streams. One is on the theoretical aspects of AI, including we have a paper that's connecting information philosophy and AI, the philosophical aspects of AI. Then there's the applied side, which focuses largely on natural language processing and generative AI. What is AI? I like to think of AI as a very powerful cluster of technologies, and I often muse with my students, what happens, how would we perceive things differently if AI were not called AI, if we called it some kind of a probabilistic machine, which is another perspective on AI. And the reason for doing that is calling it intelligence kind of conjures up all kinds of imaginations of what that could be. Fun fact, started a new company, Axosphere. I've been a serial entrepreneur. So the latest venture is a company on AI strategy, which focuses on human-enhancive AI, which kind of chimes with a lot what you have been speaking about, responsible AI and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, so let me just pick up on what you said. I'm not quite sure if this applies exactly to AI. I think we need to tweak it a little bit, but 5-10 years ago, we talked a lot about automation, and there was a lot of fear, maybe similar fears to that people have on AI right now, where robots are taking over the world. And I think we've always felt like robots should augment humans to help them do better at certain tasks. And the same way, I think AI should augment humans to do a certain task better, differently, right? And it could be saving you some time because you know how to do it and it takes you a week, but AI can do it in a minute. And so with automation, we like to say that you want to put robots on tasks that either two types of tasks. One, tasks that you know how to do, but you just don't want to do them. Right? You know exactly how to do them, but they're boring, they're laborious, they're tedious. You just don't want to do it and you want somebody to do it for you. Right? The other task is you would love to do it, but you just can't. I would love to lift this big thing, but I just can't. I would love to do large number factorization, but I just can't. Right? So things that you would want to do but don't know how to do, or things you know how to do but just don't want to do them. And I think that's how I think about robots, and I'm starting to think the same way about AI, and that's maybe one way of framing it. But that also brings me maybe to a second question. Maybe we start with you, Suzy. And I think you and Julie touched a little bit on it. Should we think of AI as cost savings or revenue generating? Or is it both? Because it feels like the use cases right now and where people see value are a lot more on the cost saving. Mm-hmm. And cost could be dollars or could be time, but it's like versus I'm using AI and I can create increased revenue. And I think we seem to be struggling more with a more revenue generation versus the cost savings.
So I think to decide which one it's like the opposite sides of the same coin, right? It's more to start thinking about what problem are you solving for? Will AI help you solve that problem? And then you'll know whatever the problem is, if it's to try and save time or money or to try and grow your business. So in retail, it can go both ways. If you have like Rufus, for example, helps a consumer, Rufus is the Amazon assistant, it helps a consumer get through things quicker but it also helps Amazon in many ways, right? It surfaces the products to you faster. It tells you what you already, they think you know, they think they know what you want, so they're helping you get there faster. You are hopefully going to make the purchase more quickly and not return it, and they can better control their inventory. So for them, it is a revenue driver, but it's also a cost savings, right? So it can do both. It just depends on what you're trying to solve for. And I think one of the things that we've been talking about for the last 2 years in retail is, I've been working in retail 20 years. We've been talking about AI for at least 10, right? It's just 2 years ago when ChatGPT came into the world.
ChatGPT AI.
Kind of, I mean, I was in marketing and strategy, so I had stopped. But when you're in the merchant office, you are talking about how to use AI and how do you think about AI in terms of inventory planning. It's all on the back end. It's not sexy, fun stuff. It's just kind of there. And then ChatGPT came and put it in consumers' hands. And so that is why Jim is now the star of every party, because everybody is more aware of it, right? And there are definitely, I'm being facetious a little bit, there are nuances now to Gen AI component, but it's kind of been there all along, and it really should start at the root of what are you trying to solve for.
Julie?
Yeah, I completely agree with everything. I will add on one little piece. I think when I'm working with different customers, it's also exactly what was mentioned about experimentation. Experimentation is hard. Experimentation takes discipline. It takes hypothesis. It takes time again. If you're going to hopefully use AI for good, automate away those tasks that none of us like to do, and I have a list if anyone wants to see me of what I hate doing, hopefully that's going to free up some capacity, and then I can spend more time on those experiments that will drive that future revenue and growth. No one in financial services is coming and saying you're getting 30 new FTE and headcount. I don't know of many industries that you're getting told, oh, no problem, you want to start experimenting. How much, what headcount do you need? It's just not possible right now. So for me, it's again that efficiency of, if I can automate away and get rid of those tasks, that's freeing up the, again, they always talk about creativity, which is fabulous, but for me, it's actually taking the time to put those smart thinkers that we all have against those things that generate the future revenue growth and give them the frameworks to really go experiment in a way they've never had the opportunity. So,
Jim? No, we'll come to you. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, I think the low-hanging fruit is efficiency, in the sense of cutting costs, and probably we're going to see a lot of that, whether it's generating text or replacing 4 data scientists with one who can use AI and do the coding for 4. That's probably the low-hanging fruit. In the long run, growth is the key, where we're going to see AI-based products, services. So there's a short term and the long term. And we did a paper with Udayan on we have just begun that work stream on examining the ROI of AI. I have a little bit of a background in financial services, so I brought that in.
Good together.
The valuation mindset. Yeah.
Oh, Christine?
So I think it is incredibly beneficial for small to medium-sized companies. It allows them to do more. It gives them better predictive capabilities. It gives them better personalization. So they can start doing things that, frankly, they couldn't afford to do before. But with that comes guardrails, right? So you have this incredible computing power that allows you to do a ton of stuff that you would normally need a data science team to do. But you have this incredible space where you can make a lot of really bad decisions. So you have to use it wisely.
Okay.
And sorry, can I just throw in that?
Please.
I think it's not binary. You can both help with sales growth or however you're measuring growth, and also be more efficient in one shot. So when you said personalization, there are a lot of retailers that are doing one-to-one personalization. Yep. So obviously more efficient on the operating side, but also more likely to convert people. So they're seeing a lift. So I think sometimes we want to think in like this or that, but sometimes it can be both.
Okay. So let's switch a little bit more towards the responsible part of AI. And there's different aspects to it, but maybe to get into that question, I think one of the things that I know I'm struggling with is you want to push AI, you want to use the transformative power of AI, you want to innovate, but at the same time you also don't want to do it Wild West style and have sort of the right balance and the right guardrails. So how do you, and maybe we'll start with you, Julie, and then we'll kind of loop around that one. How do you think about this, and what is sort of your view or advice on, yes, I want to take advantage of it, but at the same time I want to do it in a responsible way and not have to undo because I didn't pay attention to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious. How many people, financial services or pharmaceutical, are you working in those industries? Anybody? Okay, a little bit? Okay, so this is where I get to be really, really positive. If anyone has ever worked with financial services or pharmaceuticals, being in a very heavy regulated industry, I personally feel, and I've observed, governance guardrails, it is foundational.
Yes.
It's baked into cultures. So, there's a lot of financial services going, yep, okay, it's a risk. We have governance, we have playbooks, we have departments, we have groups. I personally have not seen anybody, even though we might be intrigued by the Wild West, open it up. Financial services will be more apt to go with an enterprise edition, and a lot of those enterprise editions of a LLM will have guardrails baked in. And so things that you may see in open models and so forth, within an enterprise, you can actually control those, mitigate those, and again, with the right controls, you can also embed data in a very secure, private way. So I do think, and this is just my opinion, from what I've seen, financial services and pharma are actually going to be really good adopters, and a lot of the struggles and challenges facing other industries are not to the level. We have big risk, but we have big risk all the time. We always had explainability on lending decisions and so forth, so this is just another layer into it. So again, my perspective, rather positive on highly regulated industries, still a ton to figure out.
But you're saying industry governance or enterprise governance as opposed to government putting the guardrails in?
Both, actually,
Okay.
if I may. So again, my role was global, and a lot of the AI legislation and regulations is still a little vague, a little opaque, but I'll speak specifically for the US, explainability has always been there. So basically, in my view and my clients, we're not waiting for any kind of AI rules and laws. We don't have to. We know that the bar is already, you have to have explainability. So if things are being used, there has to be governance built in, there has to be testing built in. There will be regulators who will come, and you need to produce how decisions were made, and they will pull random examples and random files. So it's already baked there. So from what I've seen, no one's waiting for what the guideline or the rule is. They're over-indexing in it in a good way, and that's okay.
Can I jump in?
Please.
Just to add on.
Yeah.
I think a huge difference in financial services and pharma is the reputational risk.
Absolutely.
Involved. So,
Yep.
like, you're moving people's money.
Yep.
Their rent, their food, so one minor mistake isn't acceptable.
Correct.
So that's where the guardrails like really come in.
They're entrenched, absolutely. They're cultural. Yep.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's a great
Yep,
point.
great point.
Yeah, I just want to agree with what both of you have said. A couple of things. Number one, in 2019, I wrote an op-ed. I think it got published in 2020. It was a call for proactive policies for managing AI. A little bit ahead of its time, I think, at that point of time. But we saw what was coming. And at that point of time, the purpose of writing the article was to encourage things like transparency and a few other keywords. In a nutshell, post that article and post a couple of years, a lot of regulations have come into place. But what we see is that some of the core principles, at least I'm not satisfied with, which means, for example, transparency. What we want when we call for policies and guidelines for AI, the fundamental idea was this is a very powerful technology. it can be used to manipulate people, harm people. So we need full transparency so that people, common people, not corporations, not even people like me who understand how things are working, but common people, they understand in simple layman's term what AI is, what do they need to protect themselves, and the government puts stuff in place which will help the common people, the end user, so to say. Fast forward, we have seen a lot of regulations, including the European regulations, which are amongst the, I think, most stringent ones. But the essence of regulation, which is taking care of people, fairness, I think we are still to get to that point. A simple proof of that claim is transparency. In a perfectly transparent, if we were to claim that the regulations are serving its purpose, we ought to know what's the recipe that's gone into creating the large language models. What are the exact data sets that's gone in? People talk about using ChatGPT for research. I tell them, don't use ChatGPT for research. I have fights pretty much on a weekly basis with other researchers and students because the people are trying to bring ChatGPT into research. I said, no, it violates the fundamental premise of research. That is, you're able to control the objects in your experiment. I don't know what Microsoft is going to do tomorrow to ChatGPT. So in my research, we have done away, I mean, we never started, but we have a strict rule, no black box AIs, because I don't know what's going to happen to the black box. Now, if it is Meta's Llama, sure, they haven't declared the data, but I can download the model onto my hard disk and freeze it. And I can say that with this model, when I did such and such experiments, these were the results that were produced. It's reproducible, it's testable, and even 10 years from today, as long as that model is available, it works. Not so with something like ChatGPT. So coming back to the, having kind of given the context, coming back to the answer about AI governance, I think it depends upon the context. If it is mission critical, like brain surgery, or anything related to the critical aspects of pharma, we need a lot of governance and rules and regulations. If it's something like generating my next social media post, really, no one's, going to get severely hurt or damaged or anything like that. So we don't need a whole lot of governance because, again, governance means you're investing time, effort, and resources. So depending upon what you're using AI for, that should determine the level of governance that goes into it.
Do you want to add something?
Yeah, I would just say, depending on what you're using it for and the underlying data, right? So in retail, retailers are very accustomed to using data to do personalized messages, which also used AI. Now it's using Gen AI. There are all these tools in your hands. We've seen consumers go from little trust to no trust to more and more trust in the tools. I saw a study last week that was, it's like almost 50% of consumers now have started trusting AI assistants and or agents more so than some of the searches that they're doing on other platforms. So there has been a pendulum. I think the guardrail in place for a retailer is how you're using personal data, and if you're authentic about it and if you're declaring how you're using it, and to give folks a chance to opt in if it is marketing, right? Not if it's an assistant, you can choose whether you use Rufus or not. I've used it several times now and it knows everything about me, so it'll say things like, 3 conversations ago, you were asking about this. How is that going? So there is something nice about that for consumers too, but it's about, the guardrail is just about letting people opt in and making sure that you are maintaining data privacy laws that already exist.
Right.
Yeah, and if I could just jump in very, very quickly. I agree completely. At the end of the day, it's trust.
Yeah.
I mean, it's violating your brand trust, it's violating your customer trust. At the end of the day, for the customer, consent and control. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what it has to be. Yep.
Okay. You want to add something else?
Sure. So whenever I think about that, I think it's all about trust. It's about being transparent. And it's about being responsible for the output of the AI that you're serving up, right? So not only do your customers know when their data is being used, but they also know how. And you have verification processes in place that verify the output, and you have domain experts that kind of gut check it, right? So we've all used AI in some shape or form. We all have seen data hallucinations. I I've seen fake data, fake data. We were talking about fake research. It's given me fake links. And if I don't verify it, I could look like a fool, and I would lose all of that trust that, you know, I need to feed my family.
So then maybe we'll start this question with you, Jim, coming from Rutgers and coming from the educational sector. Say, what you're suggesting is that we really need to make sure that everybody has that, maybe that mental trigger to check and not blindly accept it. So how do you see that coming into education and training? And, you know, I guess it has to fundamentally change how we teach students and workforce at large, how they should use AI and what checks you want to put on it, not just governance check, but just common sense checks. And does this actually make sense? Or is this something where you get an answer and you're like, you know, I'm not quite sure. And does that fundamentally then change our education system?
That's a tough question.
I said it was going to get harder.
Yeah, I know. Before we started this panel, I told you, ask me easy questions.
That was what do you do around AI?
Okay, so there are no easy answers to some of these questions. What I'll do is I'll probably explain what's going on right now. My position, other faculty, what they think about it, and I'll just ramble away for 2 or 3 minutes, and hopefully you can bring it all together. So most educational institutions, of course, they had a knee-jerk reaction. No AI, ban AI. Students and you know, people were like lamenting on social media, within faculty meetings and everywhere. My student used AI. Do you know what my student did? Do you know? And then the complaints have become more sophisticated recently, like I caught so many students using AI, but it turns out the AI checker was wrong. In 1 or 2 cases, the students had actually done it, but they showed the checker showed 70% probability, and I thought the AI did it, but actually the student did it, so on and so forth. I have other problems. I'm also the editor of a journal on big data and artificial intelligence, and off late we have begun to get articles which are AI generated. Now we are able to catch them when they're fully AI generated. It's more evident because of the depth of sequential logic that happens in human thought process is missing. It's quite easy actually. But it's more difficult to identify papers which are AI assisted, where a clever human mind sits over, does some word replacement, makes sure the logic is there, the depth is there, and stuff like that. So there's all kinds of problems going on. In my own class, while I would say 80%, I'm just giving a heuristic-based number, faculty are trying to limit the use of AI in the classroom, undergraduate, graduate level. In my recent class, I'm teaching an NLP studio this semester. First session, one of the first things I did in the first few minutes is anybody who doesn't maximize the use of AI in this class will fail. And that's because of my perspective. I teach graduate students, and I feel that my responsibility is to make sure that when my students step out into the world and sit for interviews, they're able to relate to the job market, they're able to relate to their interviewer. And I tell my students, you should be in a position to say that I am able to use AI to the extent that I can replace 3 data scientists, which means me plus AI. I'm so good at using AI that I teach informatics students, so they're looking for data science jobs. So that's my mindset. But I sit with faculty who have equally legitimate points about students not using AI, the ethics of understanding the fundamental subject matter. So it's an ongoing debate, and I think what will happen in some time, I don't know how much time that is, we'll reach some optimal point where we are encouraging the use of AI in education, in classrooms, and at the same time, we will figure out ways to make sure that students get the fundamental human intellectual skills, the logical thinking skills, the language skills, and domain-specific skills that they need so that they can optimally use AI. They're not yet there, but I think all this chaos should hopefully get us there.
Christine, what do you
What was the question again? I'm sorry.
Just how do
I got, yeah.
not just in the education sector, but how do we make sure that everybody that's using AI has not a blind acceptance of AI, or just how do we make sure that everybody is savvy about what AI can do, cannot do, and how do we educate the students in academic context, but more generally our teams, workforce, to be more AI savvy?
So I don't think it's a question of AI. I think it's a question of how do we inject skeptical thinking into our organizations. And it's easy to say and it sounds great, but that means questioning leadership decisions, that means questioning data, questioning tools, and that requires a cultural shift, I think, from the top-down organizations that we have today. So I think opening up the discussion, making, I hate using the words safe spaces, but creating spaces where dissent is not only allowed, but it's required, right? So you're not, I forgot the CEO, Ron, from JCPenney. So you're not Ron sitting in a boardroom and everybody's saying, that's a great idea. No, you want a room of people saying, oh, is that, why is this the case? What's causing this? You think it's that? What about X, Y, and Z? So you have a true diverse set of opinions. And I think it's a mindset shift. And if you don't adopt it, you're the one that's going to be obsolete. It's not AI. It's the way you approach problems.
So eMarketer is a research company. So we have also started thinking about how do we leverage AI and turbocharge our analysts so that we can spend more time with clients or spend more time at events or go deeper in some topics that we wouldn't have otherwise been able to cover. What that means is a lot of folks learning how to use AI in the right spots. And then we were also talking about this earlier, some of the different platforms have different strengths. So understanding which one to use for what. At the end of the day though, if you're reading an eMarketer report, you're going to know if it's AI generated, AI assisted, or just a regular analyst who's done the report, because we take that very, very seriously in terms of transparency. On the retailer front, I think it's two separate things, right? They're the customer-facing things where you have to be transparent and open about what you're doing and how you're doing it. And then there are all the things that you're doing back of house to try and be more efficient. And that, I think, is also, all of it ends up being a culture shift and the ability to take a step back and say, you know what? I can't do that so well, so I'm going to have someone help me do it so it's faster. Or, you know what, like you were saying before, I'm really good at doing this, and you can let it run by itself. I don't even need to do it. It can write my LinkedIn, I wish. Let's get to a place where it'll write my LinkedIn posts, and I don't have to go over it 1,000 times to make sure it's in my voice, right? So I think there's still a lot to learn, but any organization who's not thinking about how to use it is going to lose.
Yeah, I would say top down, bottom up from my lens. It has to be fostering in a corporation a culture of continual learning and continual sharing. Big, large corporations tend to work just a bit siloed. And how do you break down and bridge those silos? The other piece that I would throw in there that we really haven't touched on when I think of responsible AI would also be accessibility. Again, thinking about how is this going to work for customers who happen to have, are blind or deaf or this. How are we going to think about that? There's a lot of considerations there in terms of accessibility. The other piece of accessibility, obviously, you can't get to AI if you don't have internet access. I mean, again, speaking right to you, you know that better than anybody. How do you plan for the infrastructure and the access? Because that access is still disparate around different organizations, different countries. One other last one, look around when you're having AI conversations at the mix at who's at the table. Again, most AI companies and AI founders, less than 10% women. That's kind of problematic. So how do we bring more women, more hands-on skills? How do we bring more diverse audiences? You're going to be better at questioning it, looking for that systems thinker when you have those divergence of opinions and perspectives.
So I have maybe one other question, and then I'll open it up for questions from all of you. So while the panel is answering my next question, I have a final question after that. But so get ready with your questions for them. So maybe one aspect, when you touched on accessibility, maybe one question of responsibility is also who controls AI. Right? And right now it's so expensive to train these super large language models that the power of AI is concentrated in the hands of very small companies, a very small number of companies. And I know in Europe, working for a Finnish company, everybody in Europe always like, oh, in the cloud era, we hated that everything in cloud was controlled by US monopolistic players, but in AI it would be so much better. Now we start to realize it's still controlled by a small number of monopolistic players. Oh, and they happen to be the same. So
Yep.
How much should we be worried about the power of AI being concentrated in the hands of a small number of companies and really a small number of individuals? Who wants to
I can
go?
start.
Please.
So I think you should be very worried. You have to understand, we spoke about it's important to have good data. So what data are they using to train it? And we talked earlier, some of the models out there use Wikipedia as its first pass in research and giving you information. Well, who controls Wikipedia? So again, I think you have to acknowledge its reality. And because of that, you have to be really thoughtful about the interrogating the data, the underlying data. Your tool will tell you what the underlying data it is that it's using, when the last time it was updated. It'll tell you all that stuff, so ask. And then interrogate the output. Ask where they got the information, why they're making, when I say they, why the model's making certain assumptions, challenge those assumptions, and I hate to say that, do your own research. So you have to verify everything that you see, because you're exactly right. There's a few people that control the underlying data and information, and information is king.
So it comes back to a little bit the previous question on the education and being savvy about what it does and what it doesn't do.
Yep, absolutely.
And I think for me, I would just add a slight contrarian view in that I don't know if we should be worried because there's 4-6 players. I think we should be worried because the users are not armed with enough information around how to build the right prompts, around which models to use to do what. I think we talk a lot about AI in terms of content creation, which is a great first step, but there are lots of other things you can do, and we're just scratching the surface. And so I think I'm more nervous about every day it's changing, every day there's something new happening, and how are we keeping everyone who's using it, which is a lot of people around the world. How are we keeping them informed?
I completely agree. I think it's informed. For me, I was glad to hear this morning using multiple models. You really do have to get hands-on keyboard and use multiple models. Personally, I laughed at the question, what was it? I think we left off at 3 models a day or 5 models a day. On an average day, I'm in 22 models is my count. 22 is my average day. And those charts on latency and how they're built and everything else, I kind of geek out on that stuff. So every time there's a new model released, I'm diving in, and I can tell you I am not a tech person, obviously, based on my background, and I have never coded anything, yet I can code and create an entire website in about 10 minutes.
Wow.
And so I'm personally using that to help teach teams, help teach groups, go in and speak, and quite frankly, the best teacher is demo. And I tend to just pop open my laptop and say, hey, got a moment? And just, start showing, and it's mind-blowing to folks to really start thinking about how this thing is going to work. all with human in the loop, buyer beware, caution. I'm also a trust and verify.
Yeah, again, another area where I'm in a state of conflict. If my memory serves me right, one of the founders, or the founder of Intel, Andy Grove, he wrote a book, or he had a famous saying, "Only the paranoid survive." And that was before AI started. And that phrase stuck with me, "Only the paranoid survive." And then eventually it became so bad that now there's a battle between only the paranoid survive versus don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will take care of itself. And I think just for the sake of my sanity, I'll go with the latter. But yes, I think we should be concerned. Probably not unduly worried, because nothing really comes. Worry can be paralyzing, but we should be concerned enough to take action. And the risk of manipulation is real, because, as you correctly pointed out, if the foundation models are, that's large language models plus vision models and any other model that may, we're going to see a lot of models come out. I was a part of a brief conversation today about the need for developing medical imaging specific models and healthcare specific models, so on and so forth. So we're going to see a lot of these models come out. What goes in some form is going to dictate what comes out. Furthermore, a lot of these models, if you observe, especially the finished ones that are available for us to use online and stuff like that, they're hallucinating lesser and lesser.
Yes.
It was far easier for me and my students to trick them in 2022 than it's today. And the reason is they're getting better, they're getting smarter, and the people who are controlling them are getting smarter in terms of how to evade and how to manage the trickier questions. So just because they're hallucinating less and the obvious mistakes are more difficult to spot doesn't mean that there are no biases. It just means that they have become more sophisticated, more powerful, which means it's easier for them to make you believe what they want you to believe. So that possibility is always there, and that's a huge, huge risk with AI. Good news. So that's the worry side of it. Yes, those who control the technologies have a lot of power. Good news, 2025 started off with good news coming from unexpected quarters. China, of all the places. They released, Chinese AI scientists released DeepSeek. And for all the complaints that may have gone against it in terms of things being embedded into it, which, if you understand the structure of transformers, would be a very difficult thing to do in terms of trying to insert malicious code into it. Besides, it's downloadable and it can be fully examined. What the lighter DeepSeek models have shown is that it is possible to create language models, to create the building blocks of AI, which do not need to be a zillion trillion parameters large. You can have smaller models which are function specific, domain specific, and they give you excellent results. Some of the results were better than some of the largest models available at the beginning of the year. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that. And what I would like to see, and there are different things on my back burner. One of them, if the right resources come along, is the whole initiative, and it's already underway in many places, of developing optimally smart models. The idea, so there is a certain minimum threshold, which means you need a minimum large quantity of data, but you don't need all the data in the world to develop the best model. So there is a point of optimality. Like, for example, we are seeing very good performance even with quantized models. So 1 gigabyte to 8 gigabytes large. And these can be run on some of the newer laptops. We don't need to rely on internet connectivity. We don't need to rely on Amazon cloud. We can run it locally on the machine. And in the future, you're going to have AI models which are locally running on your cell phones, tablets, so on and so forth. So what that also means is there is a way to address the worry. Once AI becomes locally manageable and implementable, then it's a matter of effort. We can put in the effort, especially as companies, groups of people. Maybe there should be not-for-profits which focus on making human-friendly, fully transparent, optimal size smart models, then people will have more control over these. And as these become more pervasive, I think it would produce a positive transformation. And not that the AIs will become perfect, but the control would be distributed. So at least one of the problems could be resolved.
Cool.
Yeah. I think that was a completely different direction I also wanted to go in, but I think in the decentralization of AI, I don't think we necessarily have time to dive deeper into it, but want to see if there are any questions from any of you for the panelists. Yes, please.
I'm curious, I don't know if Sam was talking about it here, where you can go from 4 data scientists to 1 data scientist. Professor Ghosh had a slide where he showed the disproportionate impact on AI on people age 20 to 30, and hiring associated with that. So what are your thoughts, or what's the solutions? Because I have some macro concerns from a workforce standpoint, especially with the younger generation. I know there's a lot of anxiety amongst the younger generation that they're sort of being left behind with the implementation of some of these AI tools. What are your thoughts there? Is there a solution there? Is that really a problem? First off, because I don't know for sure, but we start to see it in the data, and is there any solution for that? Because we talk about cost cutting a lot here. Well, the easiest place to cut costs is to have simple tasks done by machines that you don't have to hire the 23, 25-year-old, whatever it may be for. So is this really a problem? Is there a solution?
Who wants to take that question?
I think about this a lot too. And I don't know, I think it's really a problem. Now the solution's not simple. I think there's a couple of things that can happen. Is you're gonna see entrepreneurship go up, right? You're gonna have really sharp people that aren't getting hired by Fortune 100 mid-sized startups, so they're gonna they have to start their own businesses. They have to do something, right? So you're going to see that. You may see more, and I'm getting super hypothetical, so you may see more younger people going into something, a skill building, almost like a union, where they can do internships, whether paid and unpaid, so they can get trained. Because domain expertise is very important with AI. You have to have the data and the experience, like Laura was saying, to be able to gut check some of the output. So there's going to have to be a way for younger work people to get experience. And whether it's paid, whether it's unpaid, whether they start their own businesses, and that parlays into a job with a more established company. The most important thing now is, as much as education is going to be experience.
I think our entrepreneurship piece is important. That's what I try to talk to young people about, is having more of an entrepreneurial mindset right now. But I know as a professor, you must be concerned about this.
Anybody else want to add to? Okay.
It's a complex answer. I'll just say one thing. I made a post on LinkedIn for my students some time ago, and the fundamental rule is don't fight against AI for youngsters, for students, and for educators also. Don't try to resist AI. We all saw how people who resisted the calculator, the computer, and Microsoft Excel, we know how that played out. So AI is like a train. The best thing you can do is get on it. Learn as much of AI as possible, and save yourself. And if every student follows that approach collectively, hopefully we should see relatively more positive results.
That's a great answer, because I guess the key to almost anything in life is education.
Yes.
That's
The more educated you can get,
Right.
Not being fearful of it, actually
Right.
taking those steps to educate yourself, I think is a smart thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll throw in one final point, if I may. I think, and somebody else may know the stat or who cited it or who stated it, 2 years or so ago, 90% of kindergartners are going to work in jobs that haven't been invented.
Right.
Do you remember that one? I figured
Yes.
you guys have to know that.
Yes.
I think helping, whether it's college students, whether it's, quite frankly, elementary school, being able to have that continual learner mindset, to be resilient, fail, reinvent, find something else, you will have 6 careers. It's just reality now. And I think that's going to be a really important skill that we're going to have to teach folks. It will potentially not be the traditional path that you're going to go here and you're going to graduate with this and you're going to get, I don't think that's realistic with the change and the pace of change.
And I would just throw in for the, like, I'm taking very literally your question. I think we forget to remind students that they can make a board of directors for themselves, right? And they can go and meet with and talk to lots of people, make the, I don't mean connection in terms of a transaction, but people that they can then go and talk to subsequently to get help. And some of the older generation, the older cohorts who have actual experience will be able to give that, and in return may actually want to learn more about AI and some of the tools they're not that familiar with. And it really needs to be a two-way sort of street when you think about mentorship and building a board of directors for yourself.
Well, can we take one question, or you
Yeah,
want
one question.
one question, and then I have a final yes/no question for the
Yes/no.
panel. Please.
You know, I love what Julie said, that it's concerning that less than 10% of people involved creating AI are women, because I think, I was in my early 30s, so 10 years in the workforce when 1998 Google came. And it was the most exciting thing, because what we learned is that to every question you have, there's 2,867 answers for it. And it opened up a world that we never knew before. Maybe, some people are too young to understand it. And so now AI is the opposite. There will be one answer to your question. And so the question is this one answer going to meet, like you were saying about the chatbot that now comes out on Amazon, which is going to tell you one product that they think is great, or 2 or 3. Is it going to need less products, less brands? Are we going to go back to 200 years ago where there's 2, 3, 4 companies that are going to, pretty much control everything? So I think AI is exciting, and I love it, and I use it all the time, and it's just fantastic. But the worry that I have is that, or Julie was saying, time, we use so much. If we buy a coffee today, they ask us 10 different milks that we want to have. And it's just that overbearing choices, and now everybody's like, I don't want to make a choice anymore. You make it for me. I'm seeing some danger of the economical side. Does it mean in the future there will be less startups sitting here, but all the big companies? Are we going to have less products? Is that, eventually somebody else telling us? And if that's the future, also for sustainability and how much resources we have, and maybe, that mass consumer things that we did in the 80s and 90s and 2000 is just not sustainable in a way, so it's a good thing. What are we learning? Why are there, is it diverse enough? Is there enough female voices in there? Because we know it from women's health, that so little research was done in women's health, and like heart disease is completely different in women than it is in men. And so all this data doesn't really mean anything for us, in a way. Are we going to fall behind of what is right for, females, or for your, this is things that I worry about it, like a little different things. So what do you think about that? That it's giving you less choices?
I mean, on the retail, truly just retail, not women founder, but just the retail side, I think it's just one more avenue for inspiration and awareness, and it will have a different impact for replenishment items, because it might actually help you save money, right? If you're always buying the same brand of, I see what you're saying, but you're already unconsciously doing that, right? If you're already, or if you think about Amazon subscription, you're already in that kind of a space. But if you're looking for a black dress or a new purse or something that's a little more fun and fashion forward, I think it's gonna help you narrow down, but I don't think it'll take away anything, because at the end of the day in retail, the product is king. So as the product maker, the brand, I think if you have the right value proposition, it's another place you're going to need to show up. But I think you're still going to have to think about social, you're still going to have to think about your direct-to-consumer business, stores if you're in stores. It'll just be one more place. Retail media is another one we talk a lot about. I think you should be fine, and we talk a lot of this at the office. Will more sales just be online instead of in store? Not in the immediate future.
Yeah, sorry to interject. I think we can wrap up because a lot of people have to go to the airport.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So I have, before we thank the panelists, I have a question I really want all of you to answer it, just yes, no.
Okay.
And then hopefully that will trigger conversations afterwards. When I see the valuation of companies today, when I see the amount of money being invested in AI, when I see companies offering $200 million to $1 billion per person to poach researchers, it has all the signs of the internet bubble 20 years ago. So yes, no, do you believe that the AI hype will burst within the next 5 years?
Only yes.
Only yes, no. Do you believe the AI bubble will burst within the next 5 years?
I lived and experienced the internet bubble. Yes.
It's very hard, yes, no. No, if we're talking about operationally. Yes, if we're talking about.
Only yes, no.
I abstain.
Okay, yes, no. Okay, yes, no, maybe. So you're maybe.
Yeah, I guess.
I'll go maybe because I'm not going to give the caveats around the answer.
Yes, it's a bubble, but we don't know when it will burst because it's a government-supported
Very hard
bubble.
to yes, no.
Exactly.
Once the government
Exactly.
supports a bubble, you can't predict when it's going to burst.
You can't put it back.
It's a government-managed bubble.
All right, fantastic. Please join me in thanking the panelists.